Today's a good day to talk about Los Teques Miranda in Venezuela. And you're thinking, where is that? Yeah, everyone's wondering where that is. Well, you'll not be the only one who is wondering. And there is a reason for that. And the reason is very simple because a lot of the people who actually visit, very few people would actually take the time to go to Los Teques. All right. And for the simple reason is like one of those smaller cities. I mean, smaller cities about over 300,000 people. So it's not like a village or a town. It's got a sizable population. So why is it that a lot of people don't visit? I think this is the same problem with a lot of the smaller towns or smaller cities anywhere you go. That the bigger ones like Caracas, that is only about 30 minutes away, just seems to cannibalize everything else, and it is just the way things are. You can't really do much about that. Anyway, so if you go to the center, something that would strike you is how clean it is. And I think that's a good thing because it means some of the municipal employees are doing a good job because, it's either that or you're fired. So you walk around, it's clean. I think this is one of those things where most major cities, for whatever reason, in some places, they take the time to clean, and in other cases, it's just like they can't be bothered. Anyway, Los Teques seems to be one of those things that are, they take care of the street. Of course, I'm talking about the street in the center of town. The further you go out, you just never know. You could drive around. The roads are in good conditions, so that's a good thing. But anyway, let's talk about some of the biggest problems facing Los Teques. One of the problems is that it's not Caracas, and that is a problem. And it's also an advantage. It's not Caracas. Anyway, but apparently the population has grown almost, doubled over the past 50 years. Like a lot of people started to move from other places and go into Los Teques. Now, you're thinking, why would you want to move from a village to a smaller town? Apparently, it's not that simple. What has seemed to have happened is that when people start moving to Caracas, like most major cities, housing becomes an issue. It becomes very expensive. And the people are like, maybe I should move away from here. And guess what? They put the Los Teques metro in production, and all of a sudden you're about 30 minutes away from Caracas. And guess what? People who can't afford it in Caracas just to take the metro and go to Los Teques, and the population just grew and grew and grew. It's nice to have more people, but the locals still face the same issues you face in most bigger towns, but it's not as bad as you would like to believe, but it's not great either, and that is important. Anyway, so it's a young population. I was actually surprised when I read that about the average median age is about 29. I was expecting it to be higher. So you have a lot of history behind the place. It used to be very small, like most places where if you're outside of a bigger city, it's a small town, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and then it gets so big that it just basically becomes a bigger version, sometimes a better, bigger version of itself, and sometimes a worse version of itself. But the center of Los Teques seems to be rather interesting. It's just clean. You've got shops, people walking around, doing their little thing. It doesn't look very touristy. I think that's why you don't get a lot of people coming here. But another thing was that someone says that the cost of living in Los Teques is almost $1,000. I'm like, $1,000? That is not cheap. But then they said the median salary is about 200. So you see the problem. If the cost of living is 1,000 and you're earning about, it's not average, it's just saying median. So obviously there are people who would earn a lot more and others who a lot less. But median It just basically goes to show you that people, even if you're not living in the bigger city like Caracas, in Los Teques, it is still not an easy thing for a lot of people to manage, survive on a daily. Now the question is, why? How do people manage, living in conditions like this? I think historically, a lot of the people, if you've been there for a long time, you probably own your own house or home, and so you're able to build something modest, and then you're able to, because you're not paying rent, so even if you're not earning a lot, that's a good thing. Another thing is people tend to live with the parents or relatives, so you share the cost of living, and it just makes it a bit bearable. But people have said one of the problems is healthcare, and because healthcare, well, it costs money basically, and you have a hospital, but it costs money, and if you basically you just pray that you don't get sick, and I think that happens a lot. You think about London, think about Paris or New York, all the big cities where you think, oh, more affluent countries where you have a lot of people with a lot of means, and of course the French has the mutuelle. The NHS has something similar, which is basically the NHS. I don't know, America, well, it's not a good example. Canada seems to have something, a socialized healthcare system. But in other countries, it's not the same. So you basically save money, and then you go and visit the doctor, and you pay for your medication. God forbid you get sick and you need major surgery. You go to the, you don't go to private clinics because you can't afford that. But the funny thing is, like in most countries, even on the NHS, people have said, oh, it's you've got a long waiting list. And others have said, look, you should come to America. It's not even that you've got a long waiting list. You can't even afford it. And if it's an emergency, if you get sick, it's like you can't work. Basically, there's no safety net. So Los Teques, Venezuela faces the same challenges that all these resources constrained from the government. The government basically is struggling to help people, and there's limited medical supplies. So people are just winging it, so to say. Now you say, if the cost of living is high and you're not earning a lot, how do people actually manage? But I think this is one of those things that those who are unable to make it, they leave the country. Venezuela has lost millions of people, basically leaving, going to neighboring countries like what's it called, Colombia. They've gone to Brazil. Others have gone to Peru, and then you have people who've gone through the Darien Gap. They've gone through like places like Panama, Costa Rica, and then they've moved up north to get to the U.S. And so yes, that is one way to survive. You leave the country in search of greener pastures. And then people are also, I didn't know this was actually a thing, but apparently people don't actually, in some cases where they can't afford things, they go bartering. So they exchange goods for goods. So you have something that I want, and then, we exchange that. And I think that is bartering. But I think, I don't know how I feel about that, but it works. And I think this only works, especially if you're in rural areas. The advantage of rural areas, even if you don't have access to all the latest tech, high-speed internet, or public transportation, often they have farms and they're able to grow their own food. So in that case, they're able to feed themselves. So hunger is not a big issue. Where it becomes complicated is like sometimes you still need cash to pay for things that you cannot grow yourself. And I could imagine then people offering their produce in exchange for cash or for other things that they might need. So that's good. And another thing that a lot of people don't actually appreciate, it's not only unique to Los Teques or in Venezuela, it's basically about developing countries where a lot of people in the diaspora have moved to more affluent countries, and they use things like Western Union to send money back to the country. And that is another way that people survive, where if you work in America, which is one of the more prized countries where a lot of people from Venezuela go to, and then they're able to send money back to the country, and $100, even if it's not a lot, goes a long way in helping families back home. So of course it puts a lot of pressure also on those who are on the other side in the diaspora, working, in freezing conditions or struggling, but they feel the need also to help families back home. And those who actually do make it and become, I wouldn't say rich or well off, then basically they don't mind sending $100 or $200 every month to their families. They're able to maintain people there or help them start a business. So the point is this, that even if there is job issues, unemployment in Los Teques, and it's a smaller town. It's growing, and so it basically is getting more expensive because of the influence of Caracas and then the metro station people coming in. Then it is rather hard. But then I think the interesting thing is that it's just the pain that a lot of the bigger cities or growing cities would have to go through. More people competing for resources, housing, food, jobs. It just means employers could basically afford to pay you less. And if you complain, they just say, well, leave. And then there'll be another you tomorrow. Like the Beyonce song, to the left. Basically, the employers will tell you that. But you can't really do much about that. So, yeah, that is some of the difficulties facing the area. But now let's go back to the history of this place. I was actually surprised that the town has been around since the 1700s. It's just absolutely amazing. I like the fact Los Teques actually got its name from the indigenous chief leader who was like, yeah, the Spanish are here, let's fight them. And he was basically willing to defend his people. So, in honor of that person, they gave the place the name, Los Teques. All right, so I don't know if he won or lost the battle, but he lost, I would think, because now everyone speaks Spanish. So yeah, okay, colonialism and all that history. Of course, no history of any Spanish-speaking country in the Americas is complete without talking about the influence of the Europeans. And the interesting thing about the population is that the population of Los Teques is quite diverse. I've heard about people who are from have Italian heritage, or like a lot of African heritage, or European Spanish, of course, because for obvious reasons. So, and that influence, you see it on the streets. You see people with a bit of flavor on the street, and that's interesting. And that's because of the history, how it shapes the town of Los Teques. And another thing interesting about this is that it shapes the music, local crafts, and things like that. So it gives the town of Los Teques a bit of a difference. So you're there. You're not in Caracas, but you're in a different place. It's got a different flavor. Caracas, like most cities, it's like basically you go to London, and then you go to central London, you go to Oxford Street, and you see all this massive, just a lot of people, and it's just like people say, oh, it doesn't feel like you're in the UK. Okay, and then you take your car, and then you go up north or you go west, and all of a sudden you're like, ooh, this is different. All right. Anyway, so Los Teques basically it has gone through the same thing. It retains its small town feel in the center. Of course, if you want to get a better feel for what its life is like, you need to go to the suburbs, the neighborhoods, and see what life is like there. But most of us wouldn't do that, not unless you know someone, or you're the type who I like to go off the path that is not frequently walked and see what my chances are. It is said that Los Teques also has problems with, crime and safety issues. Yeah, but that is to be expected in most cases. Anyway, so you have, if you want to visit the Mirador de Los Teques, I think that's how it's pronounced, and then you have, what else do you have? You have the music, the climate. Oh, yeah, something else. I think where was it? We went. I can't remember which country we went to, and you think, oh, you think South America. You think, oh, heat. Let me take my bikini with me because this is going to be a lot of fun. And then you get there, and it's like it's cold. Oh yes, it's cold because you're up in the mountains. Yes, it's South America, but it doesn't mean everywhere is like the beach city. You get the same thing if you go to like Costa Rica. Costa Rica has the same thing. There is a mountain range called Cerro de la Muerte, and that place, if you go to a place called Dota, where a lot of people go for birding. You go there. In the morning, it's like 3 to 4 degrees. When we were staying in one of these what's it called? It's not bed and breakfast, like the hotels there. It was so cold. Fortunately, we brought our heating device. We knew it was going to be cold, but not that cold. So when you go outside, it's frozen. The car was frozen. So Los Teques, I'm not quite sure the higher up you go into the mountains if it's going to be colder, but it's because you're higher up in the mountains, it's mild, only 20 degrees, on a normal day. I wouldn't say it's cold. It would feel chilly. So probably at night you would need a little light jacket. So it's not one of those places where everyone would be running around in shorts and topless or things like that because of the heat. So it's not one of those. Anyway, but I still think it's an interesting thing to visit. It's one of those places that a lot of people do not visit because it's not really touristy. But I think it's an interesting thing, basically, to see what else is available. The center itself is, I think it doesn't have that wow factor. You go to some places, you're like, oh, this feels so different. It's just like it's like you go to Machu Picchu, you're like, okay, this is different. You don't get that in Los Teques. It just feels like a normal town in South America. That's it. But anyway, it's an interesting town. See you next time.